Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today for our Datamonster dialogues. We're going to get started now. So I'm Alicia Zhou. I'm a product marketing manager here at Amplitude, and I have with me today growth expert Julie Zhou. So Julie, thanks for being here with us today.
Hi everyone.
So this is actually only our second chat ever in the Datamonster dialogue series. For a little bit of background, the Datamonster of the Month is our way of spotlighting product and growth experts who have made data a central part of their success. So during today's live chat, we'll get to hear more from Julie about her career path, personal growth, and anything you as the audience would like to ask her. So just a little introduction to Julie. She's currently the lead product manager for growth at Yik Yak, a social app that instantly connects people to everyone around them so they can share news, crack jokes, offer support, and discover the local community. And Julie previously worked on growth at the travel company Hipmunk, and before that, she worked on the product marketing team at Google on products like AdWords, Maps, and Android. All right, so first question. So you started off your career in product marketing at Google, and then you ended up moving into working in growth and product management. So I'm personally really interested to hear how you made that transition from marketing to product management and growth.
Yeah, sure thing. Great question. So starting in marketing at Google was a pretty unique experience because Google is such an engineering-led company and therefore an extremely data-driven company. And so for departments like marketing to really have an impact and be listened to, we really had to speak the same language as them. And so that meant any single marketing campaign had to be kind of justified with data, had to have very, very strict metrics around it, had to really be treated as a science around marketing. And so that was really great experience, which then led to my first startup job at Hipmunk, which I joined as like employee number 10. So at that point, I was really doing everything, working in marketing, working in user acquisition, working in analytics, helping out the product management team with user onboarding and better email sign up. And then at some point, I started reading articles about growth hacking and realized, oh, this is what I've been doing all along. Well, that sounds pretty fun. So that led to me really wanting to really learn more about every single aspect of growth. Because the way I think about growth is different from traditional marketing, is it's really holistic. It really takes into account every single department of a company. And so that led to me gaining some experience in product management as well, so I could really kind of tackle growth from all sides.
Okay, that makes sense. So it sounds like it kind of happened organically. It was a natural transition for you, starting with the really data-driven stuff at Google. Just like a follow-up to that, were there any like new skills that you needed to learn as you were moving into product management, and how did you learn those new things?
Sure, yeah, I get that question a lot because there tends to be a lot of interest in moving from product marketing to product management, and in reality there are a lot of skills that cross between both roles. There are a lot of skills that are needed in both roles. I'd say primarily being data-driven. This is the Datamonster's chat, after all. A very, very strong curiosity around how users behave, what they're motivated by, what their pain points are. Very, very strong organizational skills, whether you're organizing campaigns or you're organizing product launches, and really kind of a great sense for how to prioritize both experiments or product features, because you'll have to say no to pretty much 95% of the things that you think about. So knowing which ones to drop and which ones to invest in are really important. So I'd say there are many, many more skills that cross between the two versus new skills. Of course, product management tends to require much more interaction with engineers and a much stronger sense for how engineers work, the technical limitations of certain features, and just a sense of how all parts of your product work together.
Yeah. So for those technical things, did you have any background in like coding, or did you end up learning some of those things along the way?
I did not have a background in coding. I took about half of an introduction to CS class online. It was Harvard's introduction CS 50 class. I think that's an excellent, excellent class. even if you don't finish it like I didn't, you'll still develop a really, really strong appreciation of just how apps are built and just the steps by which you go from an idea to actually launching a product.
Awesome. Really cool. So now I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about the growth side. You've had growth in your title at both Hipmunk and Yik Yak, but I've heard that you're not a big fan of the term growth hacker. So could you tell us a little bit why that is?
Sure. So I'm not comfortable with the term growth hacker because calling something a hack implies that it's a one-off or you're taking advantage of an arbitrage opportunity or there's something secret or there's something really hard or some sort of silver bullet that between the people who know how to do it and the people who don't. And that's just not true. Growth is much more a philosophy. It's much more a framework of thinking about how to make your company succeed versus tricks or taking advantage of things that people haven't noticed yet or anything like that. So that's why I tend not to be a term of growth hacker.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you have a term that you prefer to like describe what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Growth scientist.
Growth scientist?
Sure.
I like that. It makes sense. You're running experiments.
You're running experiments. You approach things with a scientific method. You try and teach everything that you've learned to everyone else at the company so that they can then run with it as well. You empower the rest of the company based on the insights that you've learned.
Yeah, awesome. Very cool. And so you said that you think of growth not just as a framework, but actually as a philosophy. So I'd love to hear if any of your work in growth has actually influenced your life outside of work.
Sure, yeah. So I think the best thing about growth and working in growth is you kind of figure out after the fact that, hey, the skills that I've learned at my job apply really, really well to things outside my life, but you almost don't consciously think about it. I say a growth mindset is such that you approach a problem and think, okay, I haven't solved it yet, or I'm not good at this yet, but I'll just put my mind to it and I can get to it. Like, it doesn't matter how far this end goal is, we'll just get to it step by step. Like, let's not worry about how daunting of a feat it might be. So I am an amateur weightlifter, and so a year or so ago, I was like ecstatic when I managed to hit my goal of being able to deadlift about twice my body weight.
Oh, wow.
And and when I look back at doing that, it seemed not that hard at the moment that I did it, but then I would look back like 2 years ago or so, however long I've been working at it, and I couldn't have even conceived of doing that 2 years ago. And if I thought only of the end goal rather than kind of the growth mindset of, okay, let's take it 1 week at a time. Am I doing better? Am I lifting more this week than I did last week? Good? All right, great. If not, okay, let's figure out what happened and kind of start again from there. And that's very, very applicable to anything you approach in a growth role.
Yeah, so it sounds like growth is very much more about moving slow and steady and making these incremental changes over time that add up to something really amazing at the end, like deadlifting twice your weight.
Exactly, yeah.
For those of you who don't know, Julie is like a very petite person, so.
I'm 5'2".
Yeah, that's awesome. So like I just said, you've now worked at several exciting tech companies of various sizes, and that especially in the engineering and product side of companies, it's often pretty male-dominated. So I'm just curious, what has your experience been like as a woman, especially on like product and growth teams?
Sure, great question. So I'd say being a woman in tech, being a woman in growth is a very, very good way that I found to approach being a woman in tech. Because when you work in growth, it's a data-driven culture. The data in the end wins, and data has no gender. So in everything that I've done, the results have spoken for themselves. And I've kind of taken the approach of, I'm a woman in tech, but I haven't really noticed or drawn attention to the fact that I'm a woman in tech. I think I approach what I do like if the results are accurate, then my idea was the best. If the results are not what I expected, then let's redo and like kind of reconsider what we.
Yeah, I really like that idea of how data has no gender, and it's, you know, the data will speak for itself. So I can definitely see that as being like a good takeaway maybe for a woman who might be having some trouble having her ideas heard, that, you know, having the data to back it up can really help, because data is like objective. There's no, you can't like just brush it off.
Exactly, yeah.
And as you have experience now working in growth and product, what are some of the like tools or products that you've used that you think are really key to have from day one on the job, and why?
Sure. So at the very start, you can't grow what you can't measure. So make sure you're measuring everything, and make sure that you really understand what the data is telling you. So no need to name names, but a great data analytics company is like absolutely crucial to being successful in growth. And other than that, when it comes to coordinating experiments, prioritizing and managing them, there's all sorts of tools that you can use. There's no hard and fast one. Honestly, I'm a huge fan of Google Spreadsheets, as simple as it is.
Awesome. And then you mentioned coordinating experiments, and we actually have a question from the audience, which is, how do you enable your team to experiment without the fear of failure weighing down on them? So like, how can you empower them to make tough calls, even if it might not seem very popular or intuitive at the time?
Yeah, great question. So I think it's all about introducing and promoting a growth culture at the company. And so me as kind of the center point of thinking about growth at Yik Yak, what I do is I'll lay out, here's the approach to growth, right? Here's the process that you should go through to think up an experiment to run or analysis that you want to do. You should always have a hypothesis, and you should always have the actions that you would take based on the results, because it's very tempting to just want to know something for the sake of knowing something, but that's not usually a good use of your time if you can't actually take action from those results. And then when you have people approach with that mindset, then at the end, when you run the analysis or you finish the experiment, even if the data is not what you wanted it to be, you're still able to take action from it. You either don't move forward with rolling out the experiment that you were thinking about to everyone, right? That's if you were wrong, or you do roll it out if you were correct. A successful experiment is something where you have learned something that you can take action on. The only real failure is if you've learned nothing from your experiment, if you haven't come away with any sort of knowledge. So in that case, it really is a matter of changing people's mindsets to, it's not a failure if the experiment doesn't turn out the way that you expected. You just have to have expected something.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really important way to think about it. I actually come myself from a science background, and one thing that my professor always said is when you're designing an experiment, make sure that whether the experiment succeeds or fails, you still learn something either way. So even if it fails, it's not that you don't learn anything and have to like start over from scratch, it's that you learned something important that helps you move forward in your overall project, or in this case, in moving growth forward.
True. And I can't stress how important it is to have a hypothesis beforehand. Mm-hmm. And there was a great Planet Money episode about this, about like bringing more discipline to scientific studies in general, because everyone has heard the sound bites and the articles that say scientific studies have shown you that coffee will kill you, that coffee will save you, that coffee will make you live longer, mm-hmm. right? And that's because if you don't have a hypothesis going into an experiment, you can use the data to say anything that you want. It's a really intimidating, and it's very strong power, and it could also be used for like ill, right? And so as tempting as it is to just see what the data says, you have to go in with some sort of hypothesis. And that's why I think in this Planet Money episode, a lot of scientific studies are now forcing scientists to submit a hypothesis which gets stored away from their company, and they have to submit this hypothesis in order for any sort of results to be published in journals. And so that's like a good like mindset to have.
Yeah, definitely makes a lot of sense. Julie, we have a question from the audience. So the question is, what is your advice for folks who are just starting off in a product marketing role?
I'll approach this answer from both product marketing and in terms of growth. It's a little difficult for me to answer the question just starting off in product marketing, because product marketing, from my opinion, is a much more established role and then growth. And various companies will have like an idea of what product marketing should do. Growth, however, is much more nebulous, and growth in some ways could be considered product marketing, and it could be considered part of product in other companies. And for starting off in growth, find something that you want to change and just do it. Often you'll not get started because you want to ask for permission, or you're not sure if like people will provide the support that you need, or just you're not sure if you'll be like allowed to do this. But the great thing about growth is that if you find this one metric that you think you can improve by doing a small thing, then the results will eventually speak for itself, and then that will provide like ammunition that you need in order to make what you've done like productized. So as an example, a person in marketing at Yik Yak thought it would be a really great idea to have a herd, basically a feed, that featured people who had posted content app-wide that got like the most number of votes in that day, basically a top Yakkers herd. And he was so committed to this idea that he basically went through the app, manually picked out all of the posts that he wanted to feature, created the herd himself, and then sent push notifications like one by one to the people who had been featured, and just did it in the absolute most manual way possible. Well, it was an amazing success. The people who got notified like increased their amount of activity in the app a lot. People loved clicking into this herd because it was great content. And then he had all that information and said, hey, we should create a way to automate this process. And when the engineers and the product team looked at the results, they were like, oh yeah, sure. And so now it's kind of automated on a daily basis. But that never would have happened if he hadn't believed fully in it, and even without the resources, had kind of moved forward with putting together what he believed in by whatever resources that he had. So I'd say that's advice I would have for anyone in either growth or product marketing. If you believe in something, put together a minimum viable product version of it. And if you're right, then you put yourself in a much better position to get cross-functional support for it.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So just try to test it out, even like little experiments that you can do yourself before asking for more resources.
It's a lot like starting a company.
Yeah,
when you start a company, you have to sell every single person individually, and only then can you really take advantage of like economies of scale and like opening up the floodgates of distribution.
Definitely. All right. Thank you. Let me see if we have any other good questions from the audience. This one, what do you think someone needs to learn to become a data-driven marketer? Do marketers need to learn something like R, or is SQL enough? And then on top of learning statistics, what are some other skills that are needed for a marketer to learn to understand and analyze data?
Yeah, so statistics are definitely key, if only to know the difference between correlation and causation and know when a result is significant or not. Honestly, that will get you 90% of the way there. It's so crucial, but it's a skill and it's an insight that it's kind of your job in growth to keep reminding people to think of. It's very easy for people who are very excited about the company that they started or the company that they're invested in to get really, really excited about initial results. But it's always kind of up to you and in the interest of the rest of the company to keep reminding people of no calling experiments early, make sure that something is significant before you invest a ton of resources into this. And then as far as skills you need to learn to be a data-driven marketer, SQL is great. I didn't know SQL until about a year ago when I joined Yik Yak, and I basically taught myself it because it became essential to use it. I don't know R. I don't think it's necessary as for you as like a growth-driven marketer to know like all those like that breadth of skill. It's great if you do, but there's a need to dive really deep into data, but there's as much need to come up with metrics and insights that the rest of the company can understand. And how I mean that is, so let's go to Facebook's now famous metric of let's have everyone add 10 friends in 7 days. They could have just as easily said, let's have people who are casual users add 5 friends in 7 days, and the most power users add like 20 friends in 7 days. And that actually is the absolute optimized way to get our company to grow. And that may have been correct, but it wouldn't have been nearly as effective as a much more simple 10 friends in 7 days, even if it may not have been like absolutely precise.
Mm-hmm. So the communication of the idea and of the results is like really important for the company to actually be able to take action on that thing and see an improvement.
Yeah, exactly. If you are a champion of growth at your company, I'd say it's much more important for you to develop the skills to communicate what you have learned and be able to use what you have learned to inspire other people at the company. Much more important to do that than it is for you personally to get to the exact right, precise answer.
What are some ways that you've found to successfully communicate data to other people in the company who might not be looking at data in their like day-to-day?
So a great way to kind of communicate results is you ask them a question, right? What % of people do you think will post something in their first day? And they'll usually have some sort of answer. They'll have some sort of preconceived notion. Mm-hmm. And then at that point, then you can say, well, actually the answer is more like this. And they'll either be shocked badly, or they'll be shocked in a great way and think, oh, we're actually doing a lot better than we thought. But getting them invested into challenging their own assumptions tends to then leave them open to advice that you might give, because you've given them the data that has shown that, oh, what I thought like wasn't actually true, which means that then they're already in the change mindset, which then kind of paves the way better for you to have your opinions be heard.
Yeah, I really like that. So forcing them to think about it first themselves and kind of put a stake in the ground.
Yeah, people don't like to be told what they do, what to do.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. All right, I think we'll take one more question from the audience. So someone asked, there are a million things that you can be thinking about for working on growth at any one time. So could you talk a little bit about your process for figuring out the most important things you have to work on right now for growth? So how do you prioritize that growth roadmap?
Sure. So as someone who has worked in both marketing and product departments, it really is quite similar to how a company would make decisions about what product features to develop. And that is, there are many, many features that you can develop. There are features that will like make a lot of users happy, and there are features that will completely change the reasons why someone will come and use your app. And so that means having to say no to a lot of features that would be amazing to have, but if they will not drive kind of a step change in either the type of people who will use your app or the number of reasons that someone will have to remain in your app longer than they would have otherwise, then those features that don't do that necessarily are prioritized lower than the features that do that. And it can be a very painful process of saying no to many things. Actually, you never say no, you always say not now. So that's true in both product management and in growth. So when you're thinking about growth, you look at your growth funnel. Same for every company. Again, growth is all about having a framework that you apply to what you do. And you look at your acquisition funnel from acquisition to activation to retention, and you figure out where the biggest drop-off point is and focus there. That might mean that other parts of the funnel don't get as much attention, and there will always be a lot of requests from your colleagues and from yourself too that are just, it's painful to not work on all parts of the funnel at once. But if you focus on improving one step of the funnel that needs the most help first, that really pays off dividends later.
Yeah, so looking for the biggest area for potential improvement first and starting there.
So if the TLDR version of that is you have to say no to a lot of things and be able to back up with data the one thing that you've chosen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think we're getting close to time, but just one final question to kind of wrap us up. Are there any good resources or books, blogs, whatever, podcasts that you might recommend to someone who's in growth or product or marketing?
Oh, goodness. I love Avinash Kaushik. He's like the Google Analytics evangelist. He always writes really wonderful blog posts. I especially love reading him because he's very good at pinpointing this is stupid data and this is good data. These are the correct questions you should be asking and everything else is fluff, which is something that I continuously strive to get better at. Growthhackers.com is quite good. They have a Reddit-like forum where people share all sorts of articles and all sorts of tips about what the latest trends and learnings in growth. I love Planet Money as a podcast. They always talk about interesting economic stories, interesting ways to look at data, kind of challenging the assumptions that you might have. Similarly, Freakonomics, I love listening to as well. It's all about taking data, which by itself can be kind of dry and dull, and just telling really fun stories with it.
Yeah, those are all some really great recommendations. Well, thank you so much, Julie, for joining us today. It was great having you, and I'm sure the audience really appreciated it too.
You're welcome. I had a great time.
Awesome. Thank you so much.